Good people YouTube, I'm the Watch Idiot, and I've been wanting to see the Minase Divido in person for years because in pictures, it just looks so amazingly striking. So then when Minase reached out to me asking if I wanted to review one, I said yes, pretty much instantly. So in this video, I'm gonna see whether or not it lived up to the super high expectations I had for the Divido, especially after owning 3 Grand Seikos, by getting into the details about the dial, case, bracelet, and of course, what it's like on the wrist, so that you folks out there get a good sense of what this watch is all about. So yeah, let's just get into it. So usually right now I always give detailed dimensions, but my numbers didn't save and I no longer have the watch, so I can't give you all the extra numbers, but no worries because I will be giving a lot of context about how this watch wears on the wrist, because overall the on paper numbers are pretty accurate to real life. So we have a case width of 40.5 millimeters and a thickness of 11 millimeters with a lug width of 20 millimeters, which is great to see. And it was helpful because I had to put it on a leather strap when I first got it because I didn't have the time to size the bracelet, and it looks great on a leather strap. More on why I didn't have time to size the bracelet in the bracelet section because it's pretty wild. Next to the Black Bay 58 Blue, you can see that it looks a bit bigger, which makes sense considering that it doesn't have much of a bezel, and it's also a millimeter bigger than it too. And on the wrist, it does just wear like a 40 millimeter watch for sure. If this was a traditional 40.5 millimeter time only watch, it would have ended up wearing much bigger. But since the dial is more complex and it's not a single huge surface, it ends up wearing a bit smaller. So we obviously have to talk about the dial first because it's truly unlike anything I've seen before. So I asked for the gray dial version naturally because, you know, all gray everything. And there's dial in the gray. There is gray in the dial, but it's actually got a tinge of purple to it, but not to the point where it becomes too bold. I like this combination. I haven't seen this gray purpley look before. But it doesn't stop there because they've managed to give the dial a texture that is simply spectacular because they painted the dial in such a way that each brushstroke reflects in its own way, and that gives the dial a bit of a 3D effect. So seeing this on the wrist is a unique experience to say the least. And yeah, I found myself staring at the dial so many times, and I got honked at quite a few times as well for that matter. The rest of the watch didn't have to be as cool as it is. This dial alone is reason enough to want one and get one. For me, it is what pulled me into this watch in the first place. Next up are the hands and indices because they pair well and they are relatively subdued in terms of finishing and shapes, but they are still striking because the indices are very three-dimensional and they seem to claw down the dial from the outside. And oh, the 12 o'clock marker is their logo and it's just so sculptural. I really enjoy seeing it, especially the shadows that it casts sometimes. And those indices claw down over a radially brushed minute track, and the entire dial seems to be floating because at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 positions, you can see right through it. And I've never seen this effect done before on any other watch, and I'm loving it because I conceptually like skeletonized watches, but only when I can't see my hairy wrist through it. But here I can see through it and I get that floating feeling, but without seeing my own wrist hair. And it also doesn't make the dial overly busy by detracting from the incredible dial. So yeah, good job here, just balancing all these very strong elements. And then there's the date window. And I always say that if a brand is gonna have a date window, just to commit to it and go all in. And Minase for sure did that. And it shows 3 dates, which in this case makes sense since they have a custom black and white alternating date wheel, which is really cool. But the date window, if you can even call it that, is much more of a dial element since it's brushed metal and it extends deep into the dial. Interesting look for sure, and I think that's quite striking and unique like everything else on this watch. But I do think that I would have preferred a smaller traditional date window, a framed date window, only because I would want to see even more of that incredible spectacular, special, unique dial. And the visual intrigue continues with the case, and starting with the lugs that are brushed and multifaceted, they reach over the polished bezel at the corners, and again, I haven't seen anything quite like this before. And another thing that makes this watch so visually striking is that the lugs don't have the traditional parallel insides. The lug width for the straps is 20 millimeters, but at the top it's wider. Very cool look. And then those angled multifaceted lugs go into the case, which continues on the same angles. But the unexpected thing here is that the lower half of the case is black. And weirdly enough, over the years that I've seen the pictures of the Divido, I've never once noticed this. And I think that's mostly down to how metal surfaces oftentimes look in different lights, which is what happens in real life. But even still, I think I would prefer it just to be all steel, just for a bit more cohesion. And it actually could be easy to switch because Minase made this watch in a way that every piece can be replaced or repaired individually if damaged. So let's say if the top side of the top right lug is damaged, it's possible just to replace that part, which is a pretty novel idea, and it's called the Moore system. It's patented and it stands for Minase Original Rebuilding Equation. Now onto the movement. It's an ETA 2892, but it's been fully done up by Minase, especially with that skeletonized rotor with their logo in it. And I wouldn't want any other movement in here because it's going to be reliable, and it's keeping the price down given the intricacy of all the other elements. And if you say, oh, I wouldn't spend that much money on an ETA, then I think you've just completely missed the point of this watch, because there's just so much more to this watch than the movement. And now onto the bracelet, and man, there is a lot to say here, but we'll get started on the good things because it's a great looking bracelet. It's a 5 across, and it somewhat resembles a royal oak bracelet, but only in terms of the pattern because the links themselves are actually quite different. Turns out the links are angled a bit, which you only really notice when it's on the wrist. It's subtle, but it does make for a different experience when you compare it to other flat link bracelets. And then the inner polished links have 2 facets, so it kind of looks like it's bent down towards the link below it. And again, this is something that you really only notice in person. And I love that the overall design didn't go completely crazy with the bracelet, but the details set it apart from the rest. And speaking of crazy, you might be wondering, wait, there aren't any holes on the sides of the bracelets. How do you adjust the bracelet? And yeah, there are no holes for the screws or pins because you add and take off links from the back end. And yeah, this is where things get a bit crazy. So I thought that taking off and adding links would be easy because I thought that I would just take off the screw, pop the links out, maybe a plate or something like that, screw them back in, and be done with it. But no, it's not intuitive at all. I spent a good while trying to figure this out. So there's a plate over the link that you take off, and then you see the assembly inside. The middle portion comes apart and there's a hook of sorts on one end. I thought the new link would just hook in and then I would put the plate back in and off I go. But no, what you actually had to do is push the pin out of the right side and the connecting portion comes out, and then you swap that out of the left side and reassemble. But you had to dismantle the link on the left side. And also, as it turns out, the assembly of the half link is not the same, so you have to relearn a new system, and also you can't connect the half link to other regular links, so it has to be in that first position. So yeah, I mean, it's all very, very finicky, but I'm glad that it was just a puzzle of sorts. It was in a way kind of fun to figure it out on my own, as opposed to it, requiring brawn power, things not fitting right, needing modifications, grinding, all that stuff. Yeah, I would much prefer a puzzle over all that. So there you have it, a look at one of the coolest watches out there and something that deserves more attention. Yeah, do let me know in the comments what you think about this watch, and as always, hit the like button and the subscribe button just because we're getting started in 2024. And yeah, until the next video, good day.